Hi guys, and welcome to Hooked on Sunshine. We're traveling, but I had something on my mind today. Let's talk a little bit about forgiveness. Now, most people who know me know that I'm probably an over-forgiver. I probably forgive things sometimes that I not should hold a grudge for, because I don't believe in grudges, but I definitely should not let people in quite so easily after they've really wronged me. And I tend to really take that scripture about, turn the other cheek. I take it a little bit more literally than what is necessary. By the way, I drive a big 1-ton truck, so it's probably very loud. I'm heading from Nevada to Oregon, so I want to make sure that I capture this thought while it's there. So I had a circumstance happen last year, and just had really been treated poorly by some people in my life. And, I wasn't super close to them. So at the time, I wouldn't say I let it go, but I definitely didn't hold on to it very tightly, because ultimately, sorry, that's stop and get gas. Fuel, oh my goodness. $6.99 a gallon for diesel. Whew. I think it's possible that somebody has ran to the gas pump. What do you think? Okay, well, that was crazy. It only takes $100 at a time, so I ended up with like $180 worth of diesel. Some people say that I should do a young women's like self-sufficiency kind of course. Like, I know young women who don't know how to pump their own gas, which I didn't even know was possible. I'm highly independent, have been my whole life. Part of it's just being raised in the kind of family I was raised in. And then, I married a man who takes really good care of me, but we have a really busy life, and I need to be able to do a lot of things. So I don't know, that might be something that I do. Anyway, forgiveness is what we're talking about. I'm sorry to get on a tangent. Let me get back up out here on the freeway. You're bouncing all over the place. Let me get back out here on the freeway and we'll talk through that. So often, when someone wrongs you and hurts you and does really terrible things, it's really hard not to dwell on it. Not to think that in some way that they need, that you hope their karma comes, or that, and you just kind of write them off. And I had a circumstance where somebody who had wronged me some time ago got a hold of me yesterday and really apologized for the things that they did. They were trying to put their own life back in place. They told me that they were wrong. They told me that they were sorry, that they hoped that I could forgive them, and then ultimately, talked a little bit about their relationship with God and that they're trying to put things right. I was so happy at the time that when I looked back on when I let go of that several months earlier, that I hadn't held on to anything. I just felt like the process had worked correctly, and it's so rare that it does. So often when people hurt you, you never hear from them again. And sometimes you can spend a whole life really thinking about how you've been wronged, hurt, abandoned, violated in some way, really just broken by somebody. And I can't tell you how thrilling it was for my own heart that not only did I didn't say anything, I didn't remind them, I didn't encourage them, I stepped away from a relationship. I put it in the hands of God, like I've done a million times before with several other circumstances. And for one of the first times in my life, it actually came full circle, and that person actually reached out to me. And I believe that they really opened the door for a lot of healing. I don't have no ill will towards them. I'm not holding a grudge. I really wasn't thinking anything of it. I had let it go enough that it really wasn't on my mind anymore. So when they reached out, it was just really nice to see that sometimes when you do things right, it comes back to you tenfold. I truly believe that I'll have an opportunity to speak to that person in person. And so far we've just emailed, but I truly believe we'll have an opportunity to speak in person. And I believe that there is an opportunity for some, not extreme closeness, because I think they've proven that they're not a very trustworthy person. It would take some time to build something like that. But they're really on my heart and on my mind today. And who knows what God will do with that. I don't think I've actually uploaded. I did a session on forgiveness as far as like ex-spouses and ex-spouses go. And one of my very dearest friends is the spouse of my first husband. The ex-spouse. She was the first spouse. I was the second spouse. She's the first wife. When we got divorced, and this has been many years ago, 20 years ago now, she and I had many conversations. And you know, I had not been disrespectful to her. I had not done things that purposefully were trying to be hurtful to her. But you know, in divorce and in blended families, things happen. I'm sure things were said and done. There was things that I'm sure I didn't do right. And I had some preconceived ideas and some perceptions of who she was based on different things that my spouse at the time had told me. But we had this amazing experience where we were really able to talk through and put everything out on the table, things that had hurt us, things that we were concerned about. And I have a beautiful stepdaughter who she always, my girlfriend always tells me, quit telling people she's your stepdaughter. She's your daughter. You raised her as much as I did. And I can't tell you how much that really blesses my heart. But that's one of the reasons that we put a lot of time and energy into our forgiveness and our healing, was because we had this incredible experience of raising this young woman who is incredible. She's just this great kid. She was always a great kid. But you have to ultimately really be willing to be vulnerable. You have to be willing to say, hey, I messed up too. And these are things that I'm sure that I didn't do right. And these are things that I need forgiveness for as well. So in our conversation, there was a lot of give and take. It was a lot of, these are things that you did that hurt me, but these are things that I'm sure that I did that hurt you, and please forgive me. Then there was also the pieces of, I had believed a lot of things about her that had not been true. So setting the record straight. Sometimes when, you're offered forgiveness and grace in a circumstance, sometimes you don't heal past that. Sometimes it's just like somebody says they're sorry and you go, all right, well, thanks, I appreciate that. I apologize too. And then you move on. But we really hashed out a lot of the things, and it's what created our friendship, was that we talked through things that I never wanted to talk to with her. So you know how when you're the second wife, there's a lot of things within that relationship that you don't want to share with people. You especially don't want the first spouse to understand or know that you're financially struggling, that you're emotionally struggling, that there's a sexual dysfunction issue that goes on in your marriage, or that you're barely eking by, or that you argue all the time, or whatever that is. There's that constant hiding things and making sure that they just feel like, and this comes from my family, we hide things. I'm not going to say anybody else does, because everybody handles things in their own way. But the way we ended up handling it was, from the outside, she felt like our lives were beautiful and perfect and grand, and we did have some wonderful years of marriage. So there was a lot of years that were full of a lot of joy, a lot of happiness. We had a great friendship and those kinds of things. But what she didn't know was that the same domestic violence that she had experienced, and she had only been married for a year, I had experienced for 10 years. And so I came out very broken, hardly myself, really clinging on to the healing power of God because I needed it every step of the way. But let's focus on forgiveness. Even in the midst of all my brokenness and all the things that were happening with me, I still was sometimes saying and doing things that were hurting her. So I wasn't justified in any of those things. And if you're in any kind of a divorce situation or a relationship that's ending, keep in mind that there's always two sides to every kind of story. If you're dating somebody that's just absolutely talking crap about their ex, keep in mind that that ex has a story as well. You know, my previous spouse went on to tell all kinds of stories about me, a lot of things that weren't true. We had a very tumultuous divorce. He and his third wife were reckless in the way they handled a lot of our raising of our children and sharing of our children. And so there's a lot of broken relationships within that. However, when I'm talking about forgiveness, I guess what I want to talk about is just that vulnerability. Even though I had all these things wrong and I had gone through tons of heartache that my friend had never known anything about, all she knew was what she saw on the outside. I had to be honest and vulnerable enough with her to say, these are the things I was experiencing. I did get a little brainwashed and was told some things about you that I ended up believing and I shouldn't have believed. And I will say that in my dating years, for 10 or 15 years afterwards, a man did not ever get away with thrashing his wife. If he said, oh, you know, she's a jerk because she did this, this, and this, I'd be like, well, then what part of that did you play? Where were you at in that circumstance? You know, if you guys were fighting all the time, were you being kind? Were you being gentle? Were you being thoughtful? Were you being considerate? Were you investing time into the relationship? Did she feel alone emotionally, physically, mentally? I never again just believed somebody's word on the fact that it was all somebody else's fault and not theirs. But back to my girlfriend and I, we were able to really share and be vulnerable with each other on all the things that we had experienced, all the hurts that we had caused one another, and we were really able to put to rest all of those areas. Not just put them to rest, but it created a trust between the two of us that I've rarely experienced with any other friendship in my whole entire life. There's something that happens when you create a friendship with somebody who you thought was like an enemy to you. And when you finally realize that they're not an enemy at all, that you've misunderstood each other, that God put you in each other's lives for a reason. We have since then supported one another in a million different journeys, adventures, heartbreaks, celebrations. And the biggest celebration of all of that is that we do ultimately get to raise my daughter together. Now, my daughter's over 30 years old now. She has children of her own. And so those get to be my grandbabies. And because of the forgiveness that Ange and I shared, it really allowed for me to build a really strong relationship with my grandchildren and my son-in-law as well. So forgiveness is a very powerful thing. And it was just on my mind when this gal reached out to me. It was something that I hadn't had happen in many, many years. I have a lot of past history with people that have done really extraordinarily wrong things, whether it be in business, personal relationships, family circumstances, whatever. And I think we all have those hurts and traumas. And most of the time I just forgive, I give it to the Lord, and I let go. There are definitely some things that I, during my meditation, have to really work on not dwelling on. Have to really work on setting it aside, not letting it take over my mind, not letting me overthink it. Did I do something wrong? Could I have done something different? You know, all those things. And sometimes we can drive ourselves a little bit crazy with some of that stuff. But forgiveness is powerful. And my heart today is that I hope that the gal that reached out to me, that she understands that I do sincerely forgive, and that I actually asked her to forgive me for anything that I might have done that caused a negativity or any kind of a break within our relationship. She seems like she's in an honest place of really loving and forgiving and putting her heart in a good spot. And so I have to trust that when God is really working on somebody, that's in his realm. That's not something that I have to second guess whether she's sincere and believes it or not. She has absolutely no idea how much healing came to me from her reaching out, from her saying that she was sorry, that she had done it wrong. So 2 things. First, I want to encourage you that if somebody is reaching out and asking for forgiveness, that you're vulnerable, that you find your way to really let things go, to really pour everything out on the table and say, this is where I'm at, these are the hurts I had, yes, I forgive you, please forgive me, and then ultimately find a way to put that in the past and move on. And if you're the person that has wronged somebody, I pray that this encourages you to reach out and ask forgiveness. You know, none of us are perfect. We all do something. You know, we do stuff that ultimately hurts other people, breaks relationships, causes distance. Sometimes it's intentional. You know, I'm kind of married to a guy who's kind of an asshole. I mean, and he's not an asshole to me, but he is an asshole to other people in the sense that sometimes when he hurts people, he will justify it, or he'll be like, I didn't do that. Like, no, you're overreacting. I'm sure that didn't hurt their feelings. His ego a lot of times gets in the way of really truly being able to have close relationships. So he keeps his circle really small, and he's wonderful to me. But we have a lot of conversations. I'm an over-forgiver, he's an under-forgiver, if that can be possible, which I'm sure it can. We have a lot of conversations about how I let people in too easy, and that I should have better boundaries and put my walls up a little bit more. And then the same conversation back to him of, you should recognize and be more cognitive of when you're hurting people, of when you need to say you're sorry, when you need to make that communion and that reconnection and say, hey, I totally messed up. Whether it be with friends, family, siblings, your children, co-workers. I mean, I have apologized to total strangers before if something's happened where I know that it's hurt them in some way. So just my thought for today, be vulnerable if somebody's reaching out and extending grace. And at the same time, if you need to reach out to say you're sorry to somebody, don't wait. Let that healing water flow. Part of meditation, being well, being a better person, is also that retrospect of looking inside yourself, that being introspective enough where you can say, wow, I really thought I did that right, but I probably messed that up. And I can be the bigger person, and I can reach out. My whole life, I've almost always been the bigger person. And there have been times I've resented that a little bit. But ultimately, I would rather be the bigger person and reach out and say, hey, I want to extend grace. I want to say I'm sorry, or I want us to correct this relationship. I'd rather be that person than hauling around a ton of anger and spite and resentment and pain and trauma over something that I could let go of. The only reason I'm not letting go is because of an ego. So now, one last thing, because I talk a lot about forgiveness and grace. Sometimes people wrong you, and it's okay to not go there. There are some traumas and some wrongs that it's okay to just leave it in the hands of God, and whatever happens with it happens. And that you need to pray for your own health and wellness and emotional mind, body, and spirit healing that has nothing to do with that person. And hopefully there are some circumstances where, like, hopefully you never have to see them again. But you can still forgive within your heart. And it's not a forgive like I give you a pass, doesn't matter what you've done to me. It's a forgiveness that is, I'm letting go, and I'm letting God reside in that place in my heart that I was holding on to that anger and resentment. And I'm going to let go of that anger and resentment towards you, because you don't deserve to live inside my head or in my heart for another minute. I don't want to rethink the past. I don't want to overthink some of those circumstances. And so I'm going to let go of that, and I'm going to replace it with the love and the light of God, and truly let Him heal me from the inside out. There are some people you'll never have that opportunity to have a conversation with again, or shouldn't have an opportunity, is sometimes the right words for that. And that's okay. But ultimately, whether you have an opportunity or not, make sure that you do what's best for you in that circumstance. And always be looking at whatever choice I'm going to make. Does it bless me? Does it benefit me in my life as far as bringing me more peacefulness, bringing me back my energy, letting me not dwell on something that was ultimately sometimes killing us? I mean, I've had anxiety before where I've had to really go, okay, Lou, like, what's going on? What are you thinking about that's sucking all your joy out of your body? What are you overthinking? What are you spending too much time on that's stealing from you? Don't let things steal from you. All right, I could go on and on and on about forgiveness. It just really blessed my heart that she reached out to me. It was the faithfulness of God truly showing me favor, and my heart appreciated it. So I wanted to share that with you, give you some hope, give you some inspiration. Hope you have a great day. I got 2.5 hours of driving up ahead. I'm going to turn some music on and do my thing. So take care of yourself.